This is a demo of the OpenGD77 firmware in operating in hotspot mode. So I've got the OpenGD77 just sitting here. I'm in VFO mode, and I don't know what frequency I've got set, something like 4.3, doesn't really matter, 438, don't know if that's coming out on camera. No, it's like 438, 9500, and some random talk group 777. Now in hotspot mode, it doesn't really matter what talk group you're on and what frequency, because that's totally controlled by Pi-Star. So I've got a Raspberry Pi 0W board here, just the board itself. There's nothing else on it. No RF section, no hat, no jumbo spot or zoom spot on top of it. Now this is its USB external, like OTG connector, going up through an adapter to the programming cable, and then that's going into the just the side connection on the GD77. Now I'm going to power up the Raspberry Pi here, so I'm just going to plug it into my USB power thing here. Which way does that go? Okay, right. So now you can see the LED flashing on the Raspberry Pi there, so that's booting up. Now I've already configured this such that it will use a USB modem. So rather than the hat board sitting on the top, it's a different selection, which I'll show you in a minute on my PC screen. So as soon as this boots up, it will actually communicate, or try to communicate, with a hotspot and start sending commands to it. And as soon as the GD77 receives those commands, it's just in regular mode at the moment, but you'll see this will change, and there we go, on cue really. I'm just trying to get this to kind of sod's law. I can't actually see what's on display now. These things never work when you're doing a demo, do they? No, there we go, right, there we go, right. Okay, so that's now saying hotspot active 4391250. Now, that frequency is different from what we were on before, because it's taking that frequency from Pi-Star. Now that's it basically set up and running now. So if I transmit to it from my other GD77, what will happen is the green light will come on as if it's receiving a signal normally. So if you look on the top there, I'm just going to transmit on this other GD77. I'll just pick a random talk group actually. Let's go 5050. Okay, so I'm going to transmit on talk group 5050. So that was the OpenGD77 receiving. Now when it receives, basically it takes that data, the incoming DMR data, and it has to generate all of the information that's required by Pi-Star, and actually it's a completely different format from the data that's coming out from the hardware and the radio. The hardware and the radio in the GD77 completely decodes the DMR, the raw DMR data, into a higher level. It decodes it to the talk groups and the IDs, and it splits out all the audio data automatically. That's the DMR DSP chip. Now, unfortunately, that's not what Pi-Star or MMDVM host requires. MMDVM host actually requires the raw data. So the firmware, unfortunately, and this is why it's taken me ages to get it to work, has to recreate all of what would be called the on-air data, the raw data, from the decoded data that the GD77 DSP chip has decoded. Anyway, so that data, that raw data, is fed up the USB cable as USB serial into the Raspberry Pi, and then Pi-Star, specifically MMDVM host, sends that onto the network, and vice versa. And actually I can just demonstrate if I was to change and do a parrot call on Brandmeister. So I'm going to do a parrot call 9990. Okay, so I'm going to do a parrot call on Brandmeister now. I'm not sure if it will come out on display. I'll try and get the display to work. There we go. Okay, hotspot active. So 1 2 3 4 5 VK 3 KYY testing. Okay, so I should get a parrot call come back in. 2 3 4 5 VK 3 KYY testing. So you can see that was an incoming call from the net, or an incoming signal from the net on ID 9990, because it's a private call. and I think it's a private call as well back to me, my ID 5053238, and that's kind of what's actually set on the radio I was using. It's gone off now, but anyway, yeah. So that's what I was making the private call to on DMR ID 9990. So that's the hotspot function. If I was to go onto a different talk group, so if I was to try 91, which is sometimes busy, I'm just going to key onto 91. No, maybe that's long enough. Oh, here we go. Right, okay, so I've keyed onto 91, so immediately we've got inbound traffic. Oh, we had there for a second.
Yeah, from G0LHX, yeah, okay.
So what's happening now is that obviously Pi-Star switched to turn the volume down, talk group 91. So on the hotspot, it's come on, my camera decides to focus. Here we go. So it's seeing that guy's ID 2352929 on talk group 91, and on the radio, because I've got the DMR ID database. Well, actually, it's probably reading the... no, this is from the DMR ID database. You can see the call sign and the talk group and everything. Well, mainly the call name and the call sign. In the longer term, I would probably update the this to either use the internal database or the talk alias data. The thing is, if you're using it on a talk group like 91, then it's going to be impossible to hold every single call sign and ID in there to display it. Though talk alias on Brandmeister would help with that, and it could augment it like it does in the radio. Anyway, so that was that one station. I guess maybe somebody else is going to come on. Here we go, somebody else. Yeah, 50. Oh, okay, so it's a VK station. So who's that? Okay, VK6HAE. Colin. So that's it operating as the hotspot. Now you can operate up to effectively the 5 watts full power. Whatever power setting is being applied in the normal operation of the OpenGD77, the transceiver will operate at that power. However, on busy talk groups, you really don't want to do that because you're going to overheat the PA. Because the PA, the transceiver is not designed to constantly transmit at 5 watts. So I generally just run this at 1 watt because that's going to be about 20% of its maximum power, and that's probably sustainable. At the moment, I'm running even lower than that because I'm just using it locally around the house. So I've wound the power right down to about 100 milliwatts. And I suspect for a lot of people, even just in their local neighbourhood, a half a watt or a quarter of a watt would be perfectly adequate for use, in and around the neighbourhood. And I guess you can buy reasonably inexpensive PAs, DMR PAs, external PAs that you could plug in if you wanted to run a more sustained high power, but you probably still, even with a 50 watt PA, you'd probably only be able to run it at maybe 10 watts. Now, shifting across up onto my screen. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the section that shows the hotspot here, so it's taking a while to focus, it doesn't show a hotspot type. That's because in Pi-Star it's hard-coded and it will only display specific names. It doesn't read that from the hotspot itself. And the other thing to mention, the radio will only do DMR. It will not do any other modes, purely because it's a DMR radio. It's not a D-Star radio. It won't do POC-SAG. It won't do anything else other than DMR. But it does do DMR very well. And looking at the configuration, I'll just click onto the configuration here with a bit of look at a load of config. Yeah, okay, so I've obviously just got DMR mode enabled, simplex enabled, and then going down here. Now there's the operating frequency that you saw on the radio before, and my ID and everything, and approximate location really. Now the important thing is the modem type. Now that's set to Zoom-Spot Libra USB. Now I found that kind of anything with Zoom in it seems to work. It seems to use the same protocol, so Zoom-Spot Stick, that also seems to work. And this one here, this setting also seems to work. However, nothing else like this STM32DVM, I don't know what protocol that uses, it just doesn't seem to work. Anyway, so Zoom-Spot Libra, the original hotspot is the setting that I use, and that works fine because it sends the protocol which the firmware I've written understands. So that's basically the full setup. That's just kind of almost plug and play really. The only thing that you're really going to need to do running this is just to change this setting to ZimSpot Libre, you know, kind of hit apply, and then the radio should automatically go into hotspot mode, and yep, you should be away. However, at the moment this is only in beta test because it's not bug free. We have noticed there are some problems with it. So it will be a while before I can, I'm kind of confident enough with it to release it publicly, but it's definitely working. It is with half a dozen people for testing, and as you can see here, it's working without any problems in this pool. Interesting VK3 PDC. So there we go, folks.